Hello there, I'm Marilyn Hawes with Unprecedented TV for my show Heart and Soul. You will find us on YouTube. I'm also CEO of Freedom from Abuse, which is a charity seeking to prevent child abuse and any abuse existing in society today, of which there is far too much of it happening. So for Heart and Soul, I'm inviting anyone with a lived experience or a story to tell as a guest on my show. So if you have a situation you'd like to discuss, please do contact Unprecedented TV and come on my show. Together, which is what we're going to do this morning, we will discuss the issues from which all too often people turn away, choosing to ignore others' reality. And the situation needs to be given more oxygen in order to open people's minds, hearts and souls. So basically, we're going to kick the elephant out of the room. And today, I welcome someone I've known quite some time, is the wonderful Rachel Fairhurst. She's there somewhere. Hello, Rachel. Good morning. Thank you very much.
Hi.
Right.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. So Rachel and I actually, we found each other on LinkedIn, didn't we? Several years ago now.
Yeah, I think it was just when COVID was creeping in.
It was, that's right. So we go back 5 years. So this is how I'm going to describe Rachel. I have the blurb here, so I want to get it right. So Rachel Fairhurst is recognized as a leading specialist and visionary in the field of complex trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder and recovery. Her work is grounded in both clinical expertise and lived experience, having not only survived complex PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, but fully reclaimed her life from its impact. Wow, enormous, amazing woman. So Rachel, what I'm hoping today is that I know when we talk about trauma, so much of it, doesn't it? It emanates from the very early years. And I have a feeling that parents would be interested to hear, if we don't get the parenting right, if we see children in trauma, things can get infinitely worse going forward. So I'm hoping today that our talk is going to help parents better identify trauma in their little ones. So you changed. When I first met you, you were CEO of Integrated Trauma, weren't you?
Integrated Trauma Solutions. So that was the original company that I set up, and that delivered specialist therapeutic intervention for complex PTSD and training. So training local authorities, training other therapists, social workers, some psychologists, various people that worked in local authority and frontline services. And what it was really about was trying to show people the structure behind the presentation and what they would see in their practice and whatever context that was in. So essentially the training was, it was accredited, but it was also very new. I mean, back then people were like, trauma, what's trauma? And it's very easy to kind of ground that in the concept of the diagnosis. So Integrated Trauma Solutions was very interested in delivering the concept in a very structured way of, this is criteria A, B, C, D, E, blah, blah, blah. This is what it looks like. This is how it presents. This is how people experience it. This is how you respond to it.
Yeah.
So that was Integrated Trauma Solutions. And that was my first kind of, I don't know, presentation of what I wanted to give to the world. So, and I learned a lot from doing that. And, and I've grown and changed a lot in what I've done over this past 10 years. So that was, Integrated Trauma Solutions was great. It was like the first kind of step into the world of how do we solve this problem when there is actually a solution.
I picked up on that. That's what attracted me to what you were doing, because I got so fed up of NHS counsellors and so-called therapists. And that's what sort of popped out the page on LinkedIn when I thought, oh, you're interesting. I want you part of Freedom from Abuse. So what made you change? Because recently you've changed to CEO of the Integrated Regulation Board. What's that about?
It's called the Trauma Regulation Board.
So, all right, yes. Oh, sorry, yes. What is that about then?
So basically, as if you're a therapist, you have you might be part of the BACP or another kind of registrar, which is meant to regulate you. Although I will just point out, legally in Britain, all you need is your education and insurance. Legally, you do not have to register with anything. And I view that as a problem. I think therapy should be statutory regulated. And so I've started the Trauma Regulation Board, because you'll have a social worker, a therapist, a youth worker, you'll have some worker that's done a weekend course on working with trauma, and all of a sudden they think they're a specialist and they're not. So I'm pushing to make anyone that says they're trauma informed or they work with trauma to be statutory regulated.
Quite right.
Right. And so the Trauma Regulation Board, it's not statutory governed yet, but we are moving towards lobbying for legislation, because we do not believe that people should be able to do a weekend and say they're trauma informed, because they're not. They're not even trauma aware. Our baseline is trauma aware, and that means we expect you to know the legal context of your work and your discipline, how that rolls out in response to trauma, and and that's just the baseline.
And also, I mean, it's a dangerous, you're playing around with people's minds and their brains and everything else. So it's really important that these cowboys, I would call them, and I've met plenty along the way, and I think it's great what you're doing in that regard. Do you still offer, because there was a time, I don't know if you're still doing it, you offered diploma courses so people could... So now... What it is you're doing? Do you still do that?
Yeah, so now we've gone even better. So what we're doing now is, so I used to offer them at level 5, because I really wanted, even though they would be like level 6, level 7 content, I really wanted to be able to give people the opportunity that hadn't done a degree, that hadn't done that, to a pathway in. But now what we've done is we've written, I say we, because there are a number of us now, and 8 different pathways, highly specialized pathways that are currently undergoing academic accreditation, because we don't believe in accreditation from an organization that isn't academically accredited or as specialist as we are. Mm-hmm. So we are undergoing academic accreditation and affiliating with people like Ofsted, because we're covering different disciplines now. So they are oops, I just wobbled that. So they are therapy, which, is the least of my kind of involvement now, social work, working in care, domestic abuse, addiction, criminal justice. I've written this amazing diploma to work for people that are working with children that have been involved in county lines, and the list goes on.
Perfect. That's spot on.
Yeah, so we're really excited about that. So they're undergoing accreditation at the moment and will be released next year. It's very exciting.
It's very exciting and very much needed as well. Can you explain to the listening public, I mean, I still go into schools and people don't know what I'm talking about. When you talk about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, there's still people out there that don't have a clue. Can you explain what those are?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, I'm not going to run through the list of ACEs, because anyone can jump on Google and do that if they're interested to, and they should be really. But essentially, any adverse childhood experience. So if you come home and you've had a really bad day and you get into a domestic abuse argument with your partner, husband, wife, and your child is there, that is an adverse experience for that child. If you are dealing drugs, drinking alcohol all the time, if you are neglecting them, if you're not feeding them, if you're not cleaning them, if you're not helping them get dressed for school if they're very young, if you're not providing food and packed lunch and just basic well-being and love and care, that is classed as an adverse childhood experience. Obviously, everything is on a continuum. There is a scale, isn't there? Yes. So you might have a parent that is absolutely traumatized and in poverty, loves and adores their child, finding it really difficult to get it together. That doesn't mean that they're an abuser. It just means that they are struggling due to poverty and trauma and need some support. So it's not about every experience is completely adverse. It can be more complicated than that. However, an adverse experience, for some families, it's difficult to identify, because they've grown up in severe trauma themselves, so they don't understand what's not right.
I agree. Do you know what? I'd love to see schools having almost clinics for parents, because if you, as you rightly say, if you are a parent who had all these experiences in their childhood, and you've pushed it to the back of your mind, and now you are parenting, it's incredibly difficult because you're going back to what you experienced, and that might not have been a perfect format for the child. I would love to see, so I've pushed and pushed for this, to have clinics maybe once a term or something, once every half term, so parents can literally just offload their feelings and get some support. I mean, let's start at the beginning, Rachel. So let's take a situation now where mum is pregnant and mum is either with a rotten partner or whatever, was desperately worried about the birth of this child and coping. What could be going on? I mean, what happened? Is that baby in trauma, that fetus?
So essentially, I think it was Bessel van der Kolk that did a thing on toxic stress. It was either Bessel van der Kolk or it was Gabor Mate. Yes. And what they found was, so when you have a mother and she's highly stressed all the time, her brain is releasing cortisol, like just pumping it out, pumping the adrenaline out, pumping the stress hormone out. So that's going all the way down into the blood system, into the baby. And that baby is absorbing it all. So you are growing a human in traumatic stress, toxic traumatic stress. And so that goes into the baby. So it's not only that, though. So if the mother has a complex trauma history and unprocessed trauma, that trauma setup is in her body and is going into the baby. So on the end of the chromosomes, you have telomeres, and on the telomeres, you've got all this like kind of information and programming. You know how you'll have a family of doctors and everyone just becomes a doctor?
Yeah.
Or a family of mechanics, they're all just mechanics, or they're all just football players or something. It's because you've got it in your genes, yes. Right? And so this baby is going to be born with this programming, and the toxic stress can switch it on. So right. You might have a baby that's born for a mother that has borderline personality disorder, but that baby has never gone through trauma. You know, the mother's treated it very well, loved it, you know, etc. It's all been provided for. But then the baby starts displaying the same characteristics as the mother and gets a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. It's because it's already in there. So it's like the programming goes in, and it's a lot more complicated than that. But you did ask me to make it simple.
Those big long words, you know, they're just they're very, very difficult. So I mean, I've got my dog is trying to bark. I'm trying to stop.
I can hear her.
So you've got this traumatized baby now that's being born, and maybe the baby is being born into a domestic abuse situation. I'm actually relating my own story here, actually. My children were incredibly angsty and stressy, and I have friends that didn't have those issues. So that would presumably be them responding to...
Well, if they were born into a domestic abuse situation, it means you were in a domestic abuse situation when you were pregnant, right? So factor in everything I've just said, and then you have this baby that's born, you're traumatized. So if you're in a domestic abuse situation, anything of that contributes and creates complex trauma. So you would meet the criteria, right? So you have a baby born from a complex trauma mother going through complex trauma, born into a complex trauma environment where its emotional needs aren't going to be met. You're going to be stressed. You're going to be busy. You're going to be trying to over-accommodate and absorb the perpetrator's behavior. So you'll have this child that's constantly picking up on this stress frequency. And we know, you know, the frequency emits from here to about our arm length. So that child is born into that frequency. But then also, for example, if you're not regulated enough to regulate your own nervous system, and you're holding your baby and you're really stressed and this baby's really stressed, you can't regulate it. No. So that means that baby isn't getting the intimacy it needs to be able to release oxytocin, vasopressin, serotonin all together. Those three hormones and chemicals together combined is what creates the neuroplasticity in the brain. The neuroplasticity in the brain also helps to set up and regulate the nervous system, the cardiopulmonary. So this baby is going to be like a live wire on the inside, like everything's going to be very uncomfortable, and it's just never getting the regulation needs that it requires in order to regulate and not be antsy.
It's extremely difficult, isn't it? Because I mean, there would be, and there are, because I deal with people that are in domestic abuse situations, and it's so common, and it is very, very difficult to regulate yourself, and you play this sort of pretend game, don't you, of everything's all right, because you don't want people to think it's not all right. It's very difficult. So now the child is grown up, and
actually, can I just pick up on something you just said there? I just want to pick up on something you said there. You said we're all playing this game of everything's okay, but it really isn't. If you think about that level of, we're basically gaslighting ourselves and children, right?
Yes.
We're conditioning our children from a very young age to tolerate abuse, to tolerate and absorb and accommodate this very uncomfortable feeling. So when children grow up like that, it's very normal that they end up then maintaining that facade and being being comfortable with being very uncomfortable.
Yes.
So it sets up almost like a life path to some degree on how this all works.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, because when we set them up like that, or when we're set up like that, we often then migrate and follow that kind of thread of domestic abuse. But also bullying at school, bullying in the work environment, and we just tolerate it.
Exactly. I mean, I know now, I think it was 2 years ago, was it 18 months, 2 years ago, if a child is in a domestic abuse situation, it is now against the law that, when the child is meted as a victim of domestic abuse, they are now, and you have to, you're supposed to report it, because, it is now recognised what it does to a child. So
my question to that is, that's great, you report it, what they're going to do?
Oh, they don't do anything. That's the whole point. No.
So what they're going to do?
No, well, they don't do that. It's assistance.
They're either going to remove the child and put it somewhere. So instant attachment trauma. Yeah, instant trauma bond snapping.
Exactly. I mean, it's attachment. I mean, it's dreadful, isn't it? It's something like, I think I'm right in saying, you'll know better than me, but I think 40% of young children have attachment disorder. I think it's higher. I think it's higher. I agree with you. I think it's higher, having been in schools. I completely agree with you. But how, so the child's now going to nursery school, and this trauma has been going on. What I'm trying to get to is, how could a parent sort of, we're great at saying, aren't we? Oh, they're going through a phase, or somebody else will say, oh, it's just a phase. Is it a phase, or is there some other indicator that a parent might say, oh my gosh, this is trauma? Because I'm a fan of teaching nurseries to identify behaviours. We've done course.
So it depends on the age, really. Young children, and trauma reenactment follows them. So basically, trauma reenactment, often children will act out what's been going on at home. So when you're noticing an over-sexualised child at age 3 or 4 years old, they're showing you what's going on.
Yeah, that's right.
They are showing you what's going on. A child that isn't, and it's so complex as well, especially when you go into the neuroscience of it of all. What's really interesting is they don't develop the spatial awareness. They might have much higher processing speeds than other children, but they'll have a lot lower speeds in being able to learn how to read and write, for example.
Yeah. I've actually seen that in teaching. I've seen children that are elected mutes.
Yeah, I've massively dissociated. They often say, "Oh, that one's away with the fairies." No, they're not. They're dissociated.
They're dissociating. Absolutely right. I've also seen, when I've been teaching, that it's bizarre, because I think I'm right in saying it's something to do with one of the frontal lobes, isn't it? Communication and stuff. That they do find like creative writing difficult, and speech. I have actually seen that in the schools, and when I've, as a teacher, but also since then, and because when I was teaching, people didn't know all this trauma stuff is quite sort of relevant, isn't it? I mean, this is the thing as well, shouting at children, that fear factor, because how do you get away from that? How do you escape from it? And you're like almost frightened to go home and pleased to go to school, and yet you're playing with kids, and yet you don't feel like you're like them because your life is different. It's a horrible situation.
Well, I agree completely. I agree completely with you. And if we just go back to what you're saying about speech and language, so when a child is experiencing trauma, so because children's prefrontal cortex is, obviously not fully developed, they're all body based. So essentially their brainstem in trauma is activated. And we know that the brainstem is what controls the blood flow, right? So the brainstem is like, it removes the blood flow from the prefrontal cortex, neocortex, to just pump it into the limbic system and into, all the other areas. So essentially it sucks the blood. So if you've got your brain like that, it sucks it out from one side and pumps it into the right side. So the left and the prefrontal cortex go thin. And that's so because they don't need to think, you just need to survive. And then when they're doing that, it's actually removing the blood flow from the areas of speech and language and things like that. So that's why the children are having these issues.
Yes.
And that's another issue in trauma, just a generic issue of when people go, well, why didn't you say anything? Because during the traumatic time, their language is not available to them to create the narrative of what's going on in their experience. So when you say, oh, what happened? You're like, oh, I don't know. And especially with a little child.
Well, the little ones don't even get it, do they?
They don't even get it. So they don't have the access.
They don't know how to sort of verbalize it. I mean, you mentioned just now, can I just go back on something you said as well? You mentioned, and this is for people that are not as like you are immersed in it. You mentioned the limbic system. Can you explain?
The emotional brain. The emotional brain. So the brain stem is at the back there, and then it goes into your emotional brain, and then this is the prefrontal cortex, neocortex. So basically, the brain stem is amazing. It controls our blood flow. Okay, there's a bit of danger going on here. Let's just suck that blood flow out of the brain. So as you can see there in the brown section on the bottom where it's going down into the brain stem, and then, the limbic system is your emotional brain. So, that's where our amygdala is. And when we go to the prefrontal cortex, that's where we're thinking and stuff. So with children, it's all brainstem and emotion based and body based. It's not in the prefrontal cortex yet. And obviously most people know that now about, what age that gets switched on and stuff like that. But it's a progression.
So what age can you use what age could you treat a child? What's the youngest?
So the youngest I've worked with was around about 4 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But I mean, you work in a very, you adapt. If you're good at what you do, you're going to look at whoever you're working with and think, okay, how can I deliver what I need to deliver so this person can accept it and we can just move forward somehow? Like, how am I going to be able to do this? How am I going to be able to get this child, adult, elderly person into a space that's more comfortable? So you just have to adapt to them. And with little children, you can play around with, you can use EMDR and you can use it in a very different way from the standard protocol.
For people listening, EMDR, can you explain?
Eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So it's basically what everyone thinks is the rock star of processing, even though it's the one I use the least because it's absolutely dangerous if you don't use it correctly. So, but with children, they're all body based. So you can use it in a way that's really clever. And I've worked with as young as 4 and 6 years old. Oh, I did some lovely work with a young boy. And so you can. It just depends on if you can adapt what you're doing or not.
No, well, that's right. And you have to have a real passion for it as well, don't you? So now we're moving on a bit more. We've now got to the puberty stage. And the trauma is continuing. Everybody's like, which I've seen so many times in staff rooms, oh, that wretched child, blah, blah, blah. Get so annoyed because it's not, how many times have I heard someone in school say, or even a parent, what's wrong with you? And if you want to be told to go and jog on, that's the right thing to say.
But that's basically a general, if you think about that, that's just, you could even just look at that like a psyop. Oh, let's just shut these abused children down because we're too inadequate to deal with them.
Exactly. And I
always say, inadequate.
I have a real thing about language, and like, why can't we say, or I think they should be saying, what's happened to you? If what's happened to you, you're going to get a better response from that child than saying what's wrong with you. But
well, I think it's best to hold that what's happened to you in your mind. But a lot of these children, you'll ask them what's happened to them, and they have no idea.
They've got no idea. They've
got no idea, because like we were just saying with the brain. But also it's, with teenagers, so the way it's going to present more is more trauma reenactment, reckless behavior, promiscuity, car stealing, drug taking, fighting, criminal activity, loads of displays of behavior like that. Often children, so if you look at the different clusters of trauma, which I won't overdo it now, but
do another show on that.
Yeah, we'll do another show on that one. But essentially, if you look at the re-experiencing symptom clusters, which we call the B clusters, that's the B clusters of PTSD. If you're looking at their emotional flashbacks, re-experiencing flashbacks, so you go and re-experience the trauma over and over again, and that might be, if it's sexual abuse, you might become very promiscuous and put yourself in situations where you're going to be, these young people are having sex with people, but they don't want to be having sex with people, but it's a compulsion to have sex with people because they don't realize that they can say no and they shouldn't be doing it, and they don't realize these things. But essentially, the reenactment in teenagers is pretty obvious.
Yeah,
it's pretty obvious.
So many people, though, just think, oh, they're one of those kids, and no one, it's just so few people will do a deep dive and unpack it and give that child the time, because basically they don't want to go there. It's the elephant in the room.
But also, many abusive parents, I mean, we all, I had a complex trauma history, everybody knows this. And one of the main tactics of abusive parents are, God, they're just so off the rails. What have they been doing? Oh, poor me, poor me. It's all about the parent. Yeah. And essentially, at the end of the day, something's happened that's created this. Yeah. But parents often want to protect themselves, or family members, or whoever it is, they want to protect themselves.
And nothing worse than the wealthy parent, I found, affluence, neglect, and the fact that because they have money, if anybody sort of like the school, if they pick up on that parent, then they have the money to get a good barrister. I've known head teachers actually being taken to court because they've said stuff which is absolutely wrong. But moving on from this, can you explain what is the difference between post-traumatic stress disorder, which I have had and no longer good, then complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and the final one, panic attacks?
Okay, panic attacks are just part of it.
Yeah, okay.
The panic attack is just part of it. So PTSD, single trauma, it's based off you've had a reasonable life. I mean, I don't think I know anyone with one of those anymore. And and you've had one incident. You've had a car accident, a mugging, an attack, a natural disaster. You've had one incident, basically. And that's that. And so the criteria is, have you experienced a trauma? Have you witnessed a trauma? Has a trauma happened where you've had to hear explicit details about it? That sort of a thing. Do you re-experience the symptoms? Do you have auditory flashbacks, emotion, blah, blah, blah? Do you have avoidance from? You go through a criteria. That's PTSD.
I definitely did the avoidance bit, without a doubt. I just couldn't drive. I couldn't answer the front door. I wouldn't answer my phone. If I didn't know who it was, I wouldn't open the post. And I didn't realize at the time until someone said to me, your coping mechanism is avoidance. I don't do it now, thank goodness. I can't recognize myself as that person, but I do know what it feels like. And panic attacks, I do remember feeling that. So, I mean, how relevant with the work you do, how relevant is someone's resilience?
It is relevant.
Yeah,
it is relevant. It doesn't mean if somebody has no resilience that they're not going to recover. It doesn't mean that. It just means that if they had one thing or one person that showed up every now and again for them, that would give them something. Or if people had, people that believed in God, or people that believed in something, something other than what was going on, and they had that one person, And like I said, even if that person, you know, was intermittent, they still had someone.
I think it's someone also, Rachel. I mean, I would love to see more parents make their children resilient. I've seen a lot of, I would call them helicopter parents, you know, that child can't fail, it can't do anything, it can't really experience life because there's some fear and anxiety in the parent. And that child, you know, you have to be able to roll with the punches, don't you, in a way in life? And I think that's why
I mean, I was speaking with a guy recently who works as like an outreach worker for the police. And we were talking about young boys today and what's happened to them. And essentially what's happened is they have no resilience, and so they're very vulnerable, and then they get caught in these county lines. They get caught, they get groomed really easy because they just don't have these kind of they don't have these resources anymore.
I think they're lost.
And then these external influences give them the wrong type of resilience, the wrong type of resources, and we're losing our sons and we're losing our daughters because we are raising them in this helicopter or on the phone. We're raising them on the phone, and they have no kind of internal compass anymore.
No, they don't. That's right. A moral compass, ethical compass, whatever. And it's desperately sad. I mean, we could have a whole new conversation about. Lambert and I are extremely cross about this ridiculous notion that white boys need to go on misogyny courses to learn how to behave.
Don't even get me started because I'm going to start. I don't think they do. I don't think they do need to do that. I think any boy needs to do that if they're displaying those signs.
But but that's been around for ages. Teachers have been well able to display those signs and have done nothing about it. Different conversation. So let's go back on track.
Don't swing me on that one.
Oh no, I know. We could be here till Easter talking about that, couldn't we? Because there's also girls that are called misandrous, and that's another conversation. So now this is going out. People are watching us right now. So now a client wants to contact you, and how do they engage with you? What do they need to do in order to
I don't really I'm now so full, like my work's kind of escalated so much. I have a very small client base now, and I'm normally working with people with extra quite complex diagnosis as well, because I created I did the neurobiological mapping system.
Yes.
Right, well, I've expanded that, and now that's gone even further, so I mainly just work with that. I did used to have a register of people, which I will rebuild. However, working with me now is, it's almost unavailable. I am working on certain systems to make it more available, to make what I do more available through other people.
Yeah, well, that's the best way to be, isn't it? You being a one-man band makes it really, really hard. You need a team around you. I mean, I was fascinated when I first met you, how your neurobiological mapping that you did on whiteboards in your clinic. I found that extraordinary. Can you explain a bit about that?
Okay, so basically I call it cluster mapping. I did my thesis in psychiatry on one of my cluster mapping systems, and essentially what it is, I will assess somebody the way I assess them, which is much more thorough than the NHS will assess you. It's much more thorough than just doing a screening for PTSD. I look at everything, and then I align all the different clusters that you meet the criteria for each screening tool I use. And then I am able to categorize your clusters in response to your brain. And then I create a treatment plan of how I'm going to bring these clusters down in the correct order to stabilize you much swifter than you would receive somewhere else and process the trauma. So it's basically kind of like a scientific neurobiological reverse engineering of the situation you're in and the diagnosis that you have and what you're experiencing. So I think that's as simply as I can put it for you.
So Rachel, can people stay healed?
This is the thing. This is one of the issues in the current service delivery system that we have. And this is something I've just actually, a book about this will be coming out in August, late July, August. So critical analysis of the social work system. What happens is you have someone with complex trauma, domestic abuse, whatever, and they go and, access a service, and that service doesn't provide what they need. So they go out unprocessed, and guess what happens? They get the re-experiencing symptom clusters again, and they go for another trauma. So no, once you've had a full trauma processing from at least 5 different kinds of modalities done, what happens is you are able to process this trauma and be rid of it. And then you can maintain a balance in your life, and you can maintain healing, and you can maintain health. You can maintain love, relationships. However, if you have, say, a car accident, or you go through another traumatic experience in life that might not be from abuse or something, it might just be some other type of trauma. What happens is you can have some of the old symptom clusters kind of reactivate, because your brain has a predisposition for the wiring of the trauma. But it's easily processed, it's easily stabilized, it's easily worked with, as long as you're not going to get re-traumatized and re-traumatized and re-traumatized and re-traumatized.
Yeah, perfect sense. I mean, we're coming to the end of the chat, Rachel. So I do want to go on to you have a very, very stressful time. It's a bit like me. The world I work in is extremely stressful. So how do you escape? How do you find peace and your spiritual self and all of that? And what do you do to do that?
Well, that would be telling. But no, so I
have photos.
Yeah, I know. So I ride. I love horses. I've ridden a lot. I've hiked around the world. I've hiked a lot of America, most of Britain. I just love nature, the mountains, the sea, exploring. Oh yeah, honestly, I did that one, and that did test my nerve. I was like, oh. So that's Crib Goch up in Wales.
Oh yeah, they have some big ones up there.
Yeah, I just was up in Brecon actually, and I did just a few of the hills in Brecon, which was lovely. But I do.
You were. Sorry, I'm sorry. I spoke over you. Carry on.
That was in America. It's called Ha Ha Tonka. So that was, I know. So that is a park, a state park in Missouri, near where my house at the lake was, and I used to just escape there. And yeah.
Is that a sheer drop from where you're standing?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I was stood there. So my friend Samantha came and stayed, and she's a photographer. And there was we had loads of like black hawks, and the vultures out there aren't like the African vultures. And they were just circling below, and we were watching them. It was lovely.
So there was a time when I first met you, your interest in horses. You were, really are coming to the end now. You were going to set up a horse sanctuary, weren't you?
Yeah. I still do that work. People and horses. But my goal for that is to be back in America doing that. So I'm in Britain at the moment, but obviously I live in America as well.
Yeah.
So I'll be setting up, a big place over in America, which will work with England as well, because I'm setting in England. Lots of different things are going on right now. It's amazing. But we're setting up some trauma-focused care homes, really top-notch, elite delivery, service delivery. And that will be doing summer camps in America, horses, riding through the mountains, doing therapeutic pack trips, things like that. Just so we can, balance being outside, really.
Well, I just think, I say to everybody, that's extraordinary what you're doing. And it's, I wish you well. And of course, that's a great big message of hope, because I always want to end the shows on hope. I know what you've been through in your childhood and beyond, and it's extraordinary. You're an example of inspiration that you can and do. And, you have forced yourself.
You can heal, but you can never give up.
No, you can never give up. That's the point. And I always say to people, sometimes hope is the only thing that people have got left. And if you take that hope away, then what have they got? So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, Rachel. We finally made it.
I know.
I definitely want you back again, because I know there's a couple of other subjects and topics that I really want to talk you through with. So I hope we can catch you before you go back to America. But thank you so much. And so everybody, I hope you found that really interesting. That was Rachel Fairhurst, trauma therapist extraordinaire. I found it absolutely fascinating. And, you know, what goes on in that brain of ours, we don't use it enough. We don't think about it enough. But thank you very much. Thank you, Rachel, for your time hugely. And I already have a list of people that I know want to listen to this interview that we've done today. So I will look forward to having you back on again. And this is Marilyn Hawes for Unprecedented TV with my show, with my, well, I forgot the name of my show. Gosh, so stressed. With my soul, heart and soul. So it's Marilyn Hawes with Heart and Soul. So thank you, and goodbye. Have a good day.